We're in Amritsar with Mr. Arun Jaitley. Just a short while back, he filed his nomination for the big election 2014. Thanks a lot, Mr. Arun Jaitley, for joining us here. I want to begin by asking you, you were already the leader of the opposition in Rajya Sabha, yet you've decided to actually stand for polls from Amritsar. What was the decision based on?
You see, it's frequent that people move from one house to the other. There's a fair possibility that we may form the government. And therefore, the party wanted the largest number of leaders to contest from important centres. So if you see Ahmedabad, Gandhinagar, Baroda, Vidisha and Bhopal, Varanasi, Kanpur, Lucknow, and I think in North India, Amritsar, these are key centres of political importance, of cultural importance to India. And it was the collective wisdom of the party that I should contest here. And therefore, so I am here.
Today is also the first day of polls. It's all started. How confident are you that you're going to accomplish Mission 272?
You see, the expansion of the NDA has come at the right time. And I think gradually we've been building it up. It's still marginally short of the 24-party alliance that Vajpayee ji was able to forge, but we are quite close to it. Additionally, there is a huge anti-incumbency. There is also a hope in the BJP and Narendra Modi. So the cumulative effect of all this is, I think India is heading for a stable government, an NDA government, and a Modi-led government.
272 is, of course, one thing. We've seen a lot of opinion polls which are now talking about 200, 220. So once again, how confident are you for 272?
220, they are talking in terms of the BJP. So you add another 40, 50 seats of the allies, and yesterday another 15 to 20 seats of the TDP have been added to it. And therefore, we are right there. So are we going to cross the 272 mark? Are we going to be within handshaking distance of it? That's the only debate. I've been repeatedly saying that this is a one-horse race. If you look in the last round around the circles, the second man in the race is far, far behind. And therefore, there's only one party or one alliance which has a reasonable possibility of forming a government.
Now, if I were to come to the world of business, today is also the day the BJP has released its manifesto. You're talking about a non-adversarial tax regime, a simplified tax regime. Can you take us through that? And also, notice that the GST and the DTC are not mentioned in the manifesto.
You see, whenever a new government takes over, it has a fresh look. I can tell you, we are for simplification and rationalisation. Speaking for myself personally, I'm one of those who believes that a high tax regime makes the economy reasonably lethargic. It slows it down. Your products start costing more. Consumers want to buy products. They don't want to buy the taxes along with it. And therefore, you lose out on the benefit of volumes. A modest tax regime which is required to maintain the fiscal balance and concentrating on increasing the volumes on the supply side. I think that's the long-term objective. And therefore, BJP's fiscal policy should ordinarily be in that direction. As far as the GST is concerned, I'm personally strongly in favor of GST. GST couldn't come around earlier because state governments had many apprehensions against the discriminatory attitude of the UPA. I think once a comfort level is given to those state governments, hopefully GST may see the light of the day.
So we're going to see you build a consensus perhaps with states for the GST?
Absolutely, because most political parties are in favor of GST. Indian business is in favor of GST. Tax efficiency will increase. The GDP stands to gain. But the states have to then surrender their rights to the centre. If the centre is discriminatory and vindictive, the states won't agree. If the centre is fair, the states probably will agree.
So we're going to see consensus building as far as GST goes. What about direct tax code bill? Where do you stand on that?
See, we'll have to have a look at it. Because ostensibly there are some provisions in the DTC which require a very wide debate. It's now gone through the standing committee. We'll peruse all those reports, but within the framework of the reasonable tax vision that we have in mind, we'll look at the DTC.
You've talked about a simplified, more modified tax regime. How is this going to be achieved? Are you talking about perhaps just lower tax rates like excise duty, service tax, or are you also talking about that banking transaction tax we've heard about?
No. You see, I have examined banking transactions tax. There are too many ifs and buts, and I don't foresee it. We'll continue to discuss it, but I don't foresee it as a reality in foreseeable future.
So perhaps lower excise duty rates, etc. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Speaking for myself, and this is purely a personal view, I think even as far as the exemption limit for income tax is concerned, gradually it will require a relook for raising it.
You know, your personal view actually might count for a lot, Mr. Jaitley, because the buzz in Amritsar and the political buzz is that if the NDA comes to power, you're going to be finance minister.
No, I think nobody has even spent a thought on it. These are general statements made in the course of a campaign only to pat your back. I don't think there's been any discussion, even a thought spared on these subjects within our alliances yet.
What we saw a lot of criticism against was the retrospective tax. You have criticized it also in Rajya Sabha. The Bharatiya Janata Party has done it. However, we didn't see that in the manifesto. Will you try and perhaps repeal that?
I think it's a part of the tax rationalization. What we do with the pending headaches that the UPA has created, I can't comment on. It's reasonably difficult to undo some mistakes. My own philosophy on retrospective taxation is, it is possible, it is legal, but only it should be resorted to where tax has already been collected, some provision is struck down and you try and legitimize the taxes already collected because you don't want to pay a large money out of the government coffers. You don't create fresh liabilities by legislating retrospectivity because that disturbs business planning completely and detters away investors.
So do you think that should be stopped? Like if the NDA comes to power, will we see the retrospective tax amendments because of which we're continuing to see notices go out? Will that stop?
Retrospective amendments which create fresh liabilities, not which legitimize what has already been collected.
Okay, fair point. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was food security. Where does Bharatiya Janata Party stand as far as this issue goes?
We do believe that the poor in this country, particularly in the regime of inflation, need to be subsidized. It has to be rationalized. And therefore, what the Congress did by the bill, and I said this in Parliament, I don't mind repeating it now, was nothing extraordinary. They just took all the existing yojanas, which were non-statutory, and repackaged them and said this is a food bill. Actually, people are now getting lesser. The poor people are getting lesser than they did before the food bill. For instance, under your previous regime, each family of the BPL was entitled to 5 kilograms per person. So a family of 5, each family was entitled to 35 kilograms. So a family of 5 got 35 kilograms of food grain at subsidized rates. The food bill says 5 kg per person. So a family of 5 will get 25. So it's actually been reduced. The quantum of money spent has not been increased. The coverage of the bill has been narrowed in the sense that the earlier food bill used to cover 82 crore people. This one covers 81 crore people, the food schemes. And therefore, I don't think this food bill itself was anything extraordinary. Therefore, it's not paying any dividends in the elections. It's only repackaging of the existing schemes.
Are you going to come out perhaps with some new package food security?
We'll see. I've always believed that the Chhattisgarh model was probably the best. It had the least leakages, and these were targeted subsidies.
While we're talking about subsidies, what is your stance and the party stance as far as petroleum product subsidies go? Are we going to see the diesel price hikes continuing?
You'll have to link it to what the market price of crude is. You see, at a time when crude was at $32, it was one regime you could open it out. But at a time when it crosses 100, 110, now you'll have to see what are the segments which are impacted by it. Now, how these can be rationalized so that they reach the right people, because subsidies also tend to become unquantified amounts to unidentifiable section of people. So that's a regime which can't continue indefinitely. So you'll have the targeting to be done in a more rational manner.
So you're going to move towards perhaps market-aligned prices as far as at least diesel goes?
No, I'm not for a moment making a comment on that even in the middle of this election. But these are all issues which the government will seriously take up because a reform process is not a confrontationist process. It's an art of the possible.
You've criticized the government for letting the fiscal math go completely out of whack. What are your ideas? What are the party's ideas to...
In the long run, Mr. Chidambaram's methodology is not the correct one. He contracted the economy. He reduced expenditure and said, well, I've come down to 4.6% fiscal deficit. You are not concentrating on the supply side. You are not concentrating on enlarging economic activity. You are not concentrating on larger revenues. And therefore, in the long run, if we get a 5-year mandate, we'll put the economy back on the rail.
How will you do that? How will you mobilize revenues? How will you increase supplies?
Because in order to enlarge the size of the economy, you'll need to enlarge economic activity. You'll have to rebuild confidence in the Indian economy. You'll have to ease the doing of business in India. And as far as investment is concerned, the, the investment cycle which had broken down, you'll have to revisit that and recreate that.
What about foreign investment? You're in favor of FDI in a lot of sectors, besides maybe multi-brand retail?
I always regarded FDI as an additionality of resource. And additionality of resource in a resource-starved nation is always required. You need FDI in order to add to the economic activity in various segments. But this has to be considered strictly sector-wise. Infrastructure, I'd welcome it. But one area where I have a serious reservation, my party has a serious reservation, is multi-brand retail.
So will you cancel the approvals that have been given?
See now what happens to the existing ones. But as it is, there is no consensus built up in this country on multi-brand retail.
What about defense?
I am quite willing to have a government look at it. Because as of today, we are buying from foreign governments, we are buying from 100% foreign companies. Therefore, if you have a 49% or a 51% Indian company do it, in India with a transfer of technology, that's much better than the existing scenario.
So you'll have selective, perhaps, approach to defense.
We'll do that because that's an area where we do require both resource and technology.
So you're open to that idea. My final question is going to be your pro-development. You say you're going to you're going to simplify business. 3 big ideas to simplify business and attract investments.
I think I'll give you one big idea. The government has to be decisive. The government has to clear projects. The government can't linger on under the garb of GOMs and GOMs and GOMs. The government can't have 700,000 crores of projects pending and the investors just shying away. Then you have to be fair to the states. You can't say this is a project in Orissa, I don't like Orissa, and therefore since the leader's son is visiting Orissa, we'll cancel some projects or not give a clearance to the projects. You don't convert environment into new licensing and licensing with a tax. That's what this government did. And I think if you are able to give the right signals, coupled with the right policy, the political change itself in India will signal an investment cycle. We have to do the follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Jaitley, for joining us.